Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon to those watching in the United States on Zoom. My name is Paul Gross. I'm a senior fellow here at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here in person or virtually. We have a number of English events for English speakers here, and I hope those of you who are not on our mailing list signed up outside. If you didn't, you can do it as you leave. There are sign-up sheets. But today, this evening, is a particularly special event. Israel lives in a turbulent neighborhood. It's not news to anyone here or anyone watching. But one of the great sources of stability for us is the relationship with the United States. It's a relationship which has had its ups and downs from President Truman's critical support for Israel, support for the recognition of Israel back in 1948. Right now, we are, of course, living through a real golden period of the US-Israel relationship with President Trump's steadfast support for Israel that he's demonstrated on multiple occasions, which we greatly appreciate. Menachem Begin valued the US relationship, not least because he was a great admirer of the United States. Some of you may know that after becoming prime minister, he quoted two sources in his speech. One was the Torah, the Bible, and the other was Abraham Lincoln, who was his great hero. Okay, I'm going to introduce a great friend of the Begin Center and someone who's helped me organize this event, Jeff Dalby, who is currently the Israel chair of the International Committee for Har HaZeitim. You will have seen some of their publicity in the lobby. He's also an associate board member of the Michael Levin Lone Soldier Center and the former Israel director of the Zionist Organization of America. He made Aliyah from New York in 2007 and now lives in Jerusalem with his wife Shelley, with whom he has 3 married children. And as Shelley is here, I think. Hi, Shelley. I want to wish her and Jeff an early Mazal Tov for their 49th wedding anniversary, which is later this week. Entering their 50th year of marriage. No small thing. Okay, I'm going to introduce Jeff Dalby, who will introduce the ambassador, and then we'll hear from our guest of honor.
You thought I'd forget, right? I don't forget. I forget my glasses sometimes. I forget where I put them. But I don't forget where I put my heart. Actually, my wife would claim that my heart is here in Jerusalem. So as long as you remain here in Jerusalem, we'll be okay. Before I introduce my dear friend, Ambassador Mike Huckabee, first things first, I would like to thank all of you for coming. I would especially like to thank Paul Gross, the Begin Center, and its staff for making this town hall possible. It has been such a pleasure. Where's Paul? It has been a real pleasure, Paul, working with you. And by the way, I looked up in the UK, what we call a town hall in the United States is called surgeries. I'm not sure what that is all about, but maybe you can explain that to me later on. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Did you mention that all of the phones should be on mute? Pacemakers are optional. And next Monday, we're doing a Begin Center Har HaZeitim tour. And I understand that that tour is completely booked, right? We're at capacity. So I promised Paul that if we have a significant overflow for this tour, then what we'll do is we'll schedule another tour down the road at some point. So we'll get all of you up to the Mount of Olives. Don't worry about it. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome our ICHH mission, our International Committee for Har HaZeitim mission, which is here for historic cornerstone dedication at our Visitor Education Center currently under construction on Har HaZeitin. Feel free to check out the literature outside and to learn more about it and our Centerpiece project, what we have been doing, what we are doing, and what we will be doing. The transition over the course of the past 15 years has been absolutely phenomenal. Everything that you heard about the mountain 15, 16 years ago is no longer true. So what is an American-style town hall? When I originally approached Ambassador Huckabee a few months ago at his Emek Rephaim residence about doing a town hall, he was very enthusiastic and said, go for it. A town hall is an opportunity for a U.S. representative, a mayor, governor, congressman, or senator to go back to his or her constituents and after an opening statement, open the floor to any and all questions. The questions can range from the war in Ukraine to a broken sewer line. I recall one I attended in the Bronx with my then Congressman Elliot Engel. I asked him about my signature issue, the constant drumbeat of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel incitement from the Palestinian Authority, education, and media. Another woman asked about the need for a traffic light outside the school. Karen and Phil, do you remember JHS 141? So another woman asked about the need for a traffic light outside the school due to the high number of accidents. Well, guess what? The PA textbooks are still filled with hateful incitement, but a few months later, a traffic light went up at the intersection of Independence Avenue and 237th. That said, we have to be mindful that the ambassador serves at the pleasure of the President of the United States, and as such represents the interests of the United States. He cannot speak to and/or voice an opinion on the policies of the government of Israel, such as the price of milk or why the light rail on Derech Hebron is taking so long. To echo what Paul always says, if you keep your questions brief, focused, and within the ambassador's purview, I think we will have a very meaningful evening. So on to the business at hand. It is my great privilege and honor to introduce my dear, dear friend, Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Now I can give you the standard intro, a review of the ambassador's bona fides, which include Lieutenant Governor of Arkansas, Governor of Arkansas, pastor par excellence, loving husband of Janet and father of David, Sarah, and John Mark, the favorite son of Hope, Arkansas, despite the fact that a certain former 1990s president of the United States, I believe, was also born there, but he's still the favorite son. Two-time candidate for the Republican presidential nomination, leader of dozens of mega missions to Israel, #1 defender of Israel's right to defend itself, media star, accomplished bass guitarist, etc., etc., etc. I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to do that. That is the public Mike Huckabee. That's the ambassador Mike Huckabee you have all come to know, love, and admire. The Mike Huckabee who is our staunchest advocate for a robust U.S.-Israel relationship. Instead, I would like to take a couple of minutes to introduce the Mike Huckabee through my lens. The Mike Huckabee who is our staunchest advocate for a robust Israel relationship, yes, but the Mike Huckabee who I have been privileged to get to know over the course of the past 16 plus years. It's the Mike Huckabee who Pastor James Robeson said of almost 50 years ago, and I quote, "His convictions shape his character. and his character will shape his policies. His whole life has been shaped by moral absolutes. How prescient Pastor Robeson turned out to be. I have had the privilege, the rare privilege, of walking the hills of Shiloh HaKedumah, ancient Shiloh, where the Mishkan stood for 369 years with Mike. We visited the biblically saturated Binyamin Regional Visitor Center in Psagot together. And we've just simply sat and chatted together at the David Citadel Hotel, where he hosted so many of his mega missions. Most recently, we met at the US Embassy, where I brought US citizens who were injured in a 2003 Jerusalem suicide terror attack and were still seeking redress. Each time I have been blown away by Mike's deep sense of compassion and his total focus on his interlocutor's concerns, no matter who he is speaking with. It is an attribute that I believe evolved from his experience ministering to the often heartbreaking needs of his community. If I may quote from his autobiography, From Hope to Higher Ground, and I quote, "My experience dealing with every day with real people who were genuinely affected by policies created by government gave me a deep understanding of the fragility of the human spirit and vulnerability of so many families who struggled from week to week. I was in the ICU at 2 a.m. with families faced with the decision to disconnect a loved one's respirator. I counseled 15-year-old pregnant girls who were afraid to tell their parents about their condition. I spent hours hearing the grief of women who had been physically and emotionally clobbered by an abusive husband. I saw the anguish in the faces of an elderly couple when their declining health forced them to sell their home, give up their independence, and move into a long-term care facility. I listened to countless young couples pour out their souls as they struggled to get their marriages into survival mode when confronted with overextended debt. This is the Mike Huckabee I have come to know. This is the Mike Huckabee who, when I recently asked if he would mind presenting the family of my close, dear friend and neighbor, Linda Geller, Zichrona Livracha, with a testimonial, said, "Of course," without hesitation. By the way, Mike, Linda, who worked tirelessly with me on Mount of Olives related projects, despite being stricken with a fatal cancer, was also an enormous fan of yours. The trifolds that you see outside were created by Linda, ICHH International Co-Chair Menachem Lubinsky, and me. She was absolutely thrilled when you were nominated, and she would always sing your praises before our frequent meetings. Once I suggested to her that you were the best thing that happened to the US-Israel/Jewish people relationship since Chaim Solomon. Solomon was the Jewish financier who helped fund George Washington's Continental Army. Sorry about that, Paul. She instantaneously shot back. "What do you mean, since? Mike is the best thing that ever happened to our relationship." Linda, like so many others who learned that you are a dear friend, uttered the same 5 words I always hear from so many of you. "Jeff, can you introduce me?" Same 5 words. "Jeff, can you introduce me?" So, in Linda's spirit, and to fulfill the request made by all of you out there, it is my great privilege to introduce to you my dear, dear friend and the US Ambassador to Israel, the one and only Mike Huckabee.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Honestly, listening to that introduction, I was kind of looking forward to hearing me speak. There's nothing that is more frightening than being given such a glowing introduction, because then you feel like you got to try to live up to it. It's not possible for me to do that, but I want to say how honored I am that all of you are here. Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me. Thank you for putting the event together. But more than that, thank you for many, many years of friendship. Jeff and I have known each other, I don't know exactly how long, but I'm pretty sure that it was back when my hair was longer and darker. And that was a long time ago. But most importantly, Jeff and I have spent many, many days on the Mount of Olives, overlooking that magnificent view of the city and recognizing the challenges of keeping that very sacred place sacred, where people were not vandalizing it and people were not abusing it and doing destructive things that are beyond disrespectful. And through the years, we have enjoyed being throughout many parts of Israel together on numerous trips. I tell people my first time here, for those of you that don't know, was all the way back in 1973, the summer. Looking around this crowd, a handful of you were around in 1973. Many of you were just a glimmer in your father's eye at that point and were long for the time that you would be on earth. But I first came right out of high school, fell in love with Israel, started wanting to come back. And in 1981, I started bringing groups of Americans to come and see the land. And over the course of then the next many years, I brought tens of thousands of people to come see Israel, mostly Americans who, like you, who were here for the first time. And I would come back again and again and again. I made over 100 trips here before the president appointed me to be ambassador. Most of those were trips in which I was bringing people, but other times I would come for either speaking engagements or various things. But I never got tired of it. And I had friends that say, look, you've been to Israel so many times. I mean, haven't you pretty well worn it out now? I mean, haven't you seen everything? And I said, it's impossible. Places that I've gone to 50, 75 times, I go again and I learn something that I just simply didn't know. And I said, it's because that everywhere you step in this land, you're not stepping on the history of one thing. You're stepping on the history of layer after layer after layer of biblical history, modern history, and contemporary history that is being made every single day. You go to Gettysburg and something very important happened there, but there's only one thing that happened there, one thing. So you go, you look at it, and you say, okay, I've been to Gettysburg. You come here, walk the streets of Jerusalem, and where is it that you can stand and not be standing upon layer after layer of everything from when Abraham took Isaac to Mount Moriah, when King David made it his capital city, when the prophets were here, when the judges were here, when it was that there were so many iterations of faith that unpacked here. And most importantly, it is simply the place where God chose as his own land to place his own people for his own and unique purposes. And today, we celebrate the 3,800 years of history of the Jewish people in their indigenous homeland. And if anybody doubts that the Jewish people truly belong here and that this is their homeland, one only needs to go to the city of David, the most remarkable archaeological discovery probably in the whole world. And they continue to find new ways to validate that every single archaeological discovery only validates and never controverts a single verse of the scripture, which is in itself a miracle. And I love to tell people about Israel, if you're not a person of faith, I'm not sure how long you can live here without becoming a person of faith. Because quite frankly, I live here and I see a miracle every day. And I honestly have believed, and I've told people this, particularly people who say, I'm not really into the religious thing. I said, fine, but I think it takes more faith to not believe that God's hand is on this land than it does to simply look around and say, yep, their only explanation for this place and what it has become is that God's hand is upon this land. And I really believe that from the depths of my heart. Now, having come here over the course of the past 53 years, I can say that there have been some remarkable changes to the land of Israel. Stunning things. Part of the reasons that my faith is bolstered by my presence here is because I've seen the prophets and what they said come true before my eyes. When Ezekiel said that the dry bones will come to life and I will put flesh upon the bones and I will make the bones live. I can remember in 1973, there were a lot of places in Israel that were dry bones, no flesh. I come now to the places that truly are alive. When the scripture speaks of the desert blooming, I remember when it was just desert. I remember not very far from the very center of Jerusalem, places now that are filled with massive and beautiful communities. And now I look at these places and there are forests and there are groves and there are vineyards and there are farms and they're producing fruits and vegetables that are being exported all over the world and feeding people here in Israel. And I can remember when there was nothing there but just dirt and rock and nothing that beautiful to look at. I even remember being in the old city on a Friday when the Bedouins would be moving their livestock through the old city so they could sell sheep and goats. It was not a tourist attraction. They were there actually to market the animals. I don't see that anymore. Things have changed quite a bit. Interestingly, there was not a lot of traffic in Jerusalem because there weren't a lot of cars. And most of them were a bunch of beat up old junkers that the Russians had gotten rid of and shipped here somehow. And the roads were all two-lane. There were no freeways. But it didn't matter because aren't that many cars to mess up the traffic. Sometimes I'm wishing we would go back to the time. I think somewhere around COVID, every Israeli bought at least 3 cars and tries to drive all 3 of them every single day. My favorite story is that there was a Israeli who bought a little piece of land down in the Negev, and it was in the middle of the desert, and it was not anything to think highly of. But he went down there and he used something that the Israelis created, drip irrigation, changed the world, still changing the world, creating food opportunities for people who have food scarcity rather than food security. This Israeli worked that land, and it was hard work. And he took what was nothing more than rock and sand, and he began to develop it and build it. And over a period of time, he made a farm out of that desert. And he had beautiful, wonderful, green, lush plants growing and fruits and vegetables. And one day, his rabbi came to see him. His rabbi remembered what it was like when he first got it, and he said to him, "Oh, my son, what you and God have done with this place." And the farmer wiped the sweat from his brow, looked at his rabbi and said, "Yeah, Rabbi, well, you should have seen it when God had it all by himself." It is a great reminder that I see the hand of God in this land, but I also see the hand of people who made Aliyah. They came here and they made something that is nothing short of a land of miracles. And it is the miracles of people who understand that 3,800 years ago, God gave this land to the Jewish people, and he said, "It's yours. Now take good care of it and bless the world through it. And those who bless you, I will bless. But those who curse you, I will curse." Sometimes people ask me, "You're not even Jewish. Why do you love the Jewish people? Why do you love the Jewish land? Why is it that when you're here, you speak with enthusiasm about this being the land that God has given to the Jews?" And I said, "Because I'm not stupid. If I have a choice between getting a blessing or getting a curse, I take the blessing. Every day of the week and twice on Sunday, I take the blessing." So tonight, we're going to have an opportunity for just an open discussion. You'll be able to ask anything you want. Not necessarily will I answer it. I'll pretend that I'm answering it, okay? Enough years, 35 plus years of politics, I've learned how to say a lot of things that mean absolutely nothing. But I will do my best to answer with a great deal of candor because fortunately, I work for a president who is as candid as anybody on earth has ever been. You know, sometimes I hear say, I'll tell you that President Trump, he just rubs me the wrong way. And I always want to say, well, then just turn around. He'll rub you the right way. May not be the president. It may be you're headed the wrong direction. Look, what many people don't appreciate or admire about President Trump, I absolutely love about him. I love the transparency. I love the candor. I love the fact that when you're talking to him or you're listening to him, you know what he's thinking. There aren't any doubts about what did he really mean. Sometimes you wish you didn't know what he really meant. But you're grateful that you didn't have to guess and that he does not speak in the kind of political talk where people are not honest. I love that about President Trump. But there's something I love even more. It's not just that he says what he thinks, but what he thinks and what he says are the things that I want someone to say. I want someone to say that he wants America to be stronger, safer, and more prosperous. I like that. I want a president who recognizes that Jerusalem is the indigenous, forever, eternal home of the Jewish people and the capital of Israel. I like that. I love the fact that he acknowledged the sovereignty that Israel has over the Golan Heights because it's a strategic place that is biblical. And he has every reason to affirm what everyone who lived here truly understood. I'm grateful that the president made a promise, like a lot of promises that he has made, and he kept it. He said he would move the embassy to Jerusalem, and he did it. There was a lady that I saw at my church this morning, and she said to me, what about the president? He made some promises to the people of Iran. Is he going to keep them? And I said, can you tell me of a promise he has not kept? And she stood there and she says, well, I don't think so. I said, then plan on him keeping this one too, because that's who he is. Now, having said that, I will let you know this. As you know, President Trump is famous for firing people on Twitter. He's gotten rid of a number of cabinet people when they woke up and they found out they didn't have a job anymore. So people say, what is your day like? What do you start with? I said, well, the first thing I do every morning is I wake up and I read the president's social media and I see if there's any reason for me to get dressed and go to the embassy and go to work. Or do I turn to my wife and I say, let's start packing where it looks like we're going home. And if I still have a job, I consider myself to be the most blessed, fortunate person on earth to serve the President, the United States of America, 340 million Americans who live there at what I believe to be the most incredible joy, privilege that I could have imagined, and that is representing the United States of America to the people of Israel and to the state of Israel. And I'm grateful for that. When we have members of Congress come to Israel, which is almost every week, one of the things I love to say when they arrive is, welcome to the 436th Congressional District. And they look at me like, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't know if you know this or not, but there are over 700,000 Americans who live in Israel. And that is a full congressional district. So these Americans, they vote here too. And it's interesting that most people in the US, even our elected officials, do not understand that 700,000 Americans living here means that the only nation on earth where more Americans live outside of the United States is Mexico. Mexico's number one, makes sense, of course. You have these four very largely populated states on the southern border, right there at the Mexican border, so that would stand to reason. But wouldn't it also stand to reason that maybe there would be more Americans living in Canada or the UK or France or Italy or Spain or Germany or maybe Japan, one of our more largely populated allies? But it isn't. It's none of those. It is this little sliver of real estate the size of New Jersey, stuck in the middle of the Middle East, surrounded by people who would love to destroy it. And that's where more Americans live than any other place in the world. How many Americans do we have here tonight? Wow. Gosh, if all of you had voted for me when I ran for president. Thank you. Sir, I don't know if your wife appreciates how smart you are, but I want you to know, God bless you. Thank you. No, I might be living in 1600 Pennsylvania had it been. So thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here, honored and grateful, and I'm looking forward to a robust discussion with you tonight. So I say, as we say down in Arkansas, we say a lot of things in the South that don't always translate. Not only doesn't translate in Israel, a lot of it doesn't even translate to people living in New York because it's very Southern and very colloquial. But here's something we will say that I will now say to you. It's time to pull the rope and start the motor. I hope that translates and you understand. So let's get started.
Okay. Just check my colleagues are primed with their microphones. By the way, Jeff, you mentioned about the British version of a town hall as a surgery. I think it's because British politics is always so painful. Although God knows what that would mean Israeli politics would be, what it would be called in Israeli politics. Yeah. Mr. Ambassador, while we're waiting just for my colleagues to be ready, I'll just take the prerogative of asking a question of my own, if I may. So, obviously, you're a well-known figure in American politics for a long time. But if someone is to Google your name right now, as I did today, one of the things that comes up is your challenge to a certain Tucker Carlson to a conversation, because I think he, amongst other things, took some pot shots at Christian Zionism, Christian support for Israel. Can you maybe just update us on if that conversation's happening and when we should look out for it?
We are scheduled to do an interview this Wednesday. And so he's coming in to do it. He'll be here just a short period of time. I begged him to try to spend some time in Israel. He talks about it a lot. And I think it would be very helpful if he actually got to know the country and the people better. But this will be at least an opportunity for me to sit down with him. He's a person I've known for 35 years, worked with him in New York at Fox News for 6.5 years. I honestly do not recognize the Tucker Carlson that I see and hear today from the one that I knew and worked with. And it's part of the reason that when he kept saying some things about me on his podcast, and he said that people like me, who are Christian Zionists, have a brain virus. He made the comment that Christian Zionists are to him the most repulsive people on earth. He can't stand us more than anyone. And a few other nice things like that. I finally said, Tucker, instead of talking about me, why don't you come and talk to me? And let's visit. And he said yes. So I'm very happy about that. I'll have a chance to visit with him. It will be an unedited, I think, 2-hour conversation. If I can stay awake that long, I don't know. At my age, we'll have to see, but I think I can do it. But I look forward to not yelling and arguing. To me, that's unproductive. And I live by the Proverbs. And if you know in the scripture, in the Proverbs, it says that grievous words stir up anger, but a soft answer turns away wrath. I'm not interested in grievous words that just stir up anger. We've got enough heat in the world. What we need is more light. What I want to do is to turn on the lights for Tucker Carlson, to help him understand when he says things like that Christian Zionism is a heresy. I would say, no, the heresy is in not believing that God will always keep his covenant, always. And that God didn't make a covenant with the Jewish people and then break it. That idea of replacement theology, that's the heresy. Because it's irrational to ever believe that God would make a promise and then say, yeah, I'm not serious about it anymore. Now, we're fickle enough that we will break promises to God. But he is the immutable God that does not break a promise. So it's irrational to think that that's even possible. We'll talk about some things that he has said recently about that Christians are persecuted terribly in Israel. I will say to him, you know, in 1948, there were 34,000 Christians that lived in Israel. Today, there's 184,000. It is the only place in the entire region where the Christians have actually grown and have thrived. No other place. Not in Jordan, not in Lebanon, not in Syria, not in Qatar, for sure, not in Saudi Arabia, not in any other country in the region. Are there more Christians now than there were 20, 30, 40, 60, 80 years ago? They just weren't. So to say that is to say something that is demonstrably untrue. So one of the reasons that I'm looking forward to the visit is so that we can have an honest but civil discussion about what this land is really about and what its people are about. And when I hear people say things like, well, Israel, you know, they committed genocide in Gaza, to which I will say, if Israel was trying to commit genocide, they did a really, really lousy job at it. Because after 2 years, there were a lot of people still standing. Israel has the military capacity. They could have wiped Gaza out completely in 2.5 hours. So this nonsense about that, and no army in the history of the world, including that of the United States, has ever gone to the great depths and lengths to try to prevent civilian casualties. And there never would have been civilian casualties in Gaza if on October the 8th, Hamas would have released every one of the 252 hostages that they took, kept, starved, tortured, and abused. So this nonsense about that Israel wanted the war to go on is absurd. I look forward to us being able to discuss that and many other things.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we look forward to that conversation and someone bringing some actual truth and knowledge to a conversation with Tucker Carlson would be very refreshing. Okay, let's open the floor. It's the gentleman here with the blue shirt was the first. Just if you can just wait for the mic, because I want to make sure that everyone hears and also our audience on Zoom hears as well.
Now, you do have to sing your questions. That's part of the...
And just to reiterate what Jeff said, every question should have an audible question mark at the end, okay? Thank you.
I would like to make.
Well played.
I would like to share an idea and ask you what you think of it. The situation of the Arabs in Gaza, there's a argument in Israel, is there anything such as a innocent bystander in the Gaza? That's not the issue. There are definitely people there who are not eating well, and we heard on Saturday Night News here in Israel that a single cigarette goes for $20 in the Gaza Strip. Now, we pump in the humanitarian aid on trucks and drop them in crates from the air, and the Hamas takes them over immediately and sells them for outrageous prices. And I was thinking that if a plane, maybe it should be a Qatari plane so that the Gazans won't shoot it down, but if a plane flies over the whole Gaza Strip, breakfast, lunch, and supper, and drops out individually wrapped sandwiches that will float down with small parachutes to the earth. I'm serious. And kids can pick them up, and there can be water distributed the same way, and cigarettes if they need cigarettes. And I would just like to hear if you have anything to say about that.
There's actually been a number of air drops of food with the little parachutes. Actually, there's a process, and it's a little whirly thing that lets the food go gently down, because sometimes when people do pallets of food dropping, people get crushed under them. So this is very safe, and even if you got hit in the head by it, it wouldn't hurt you. So that's been going on for quite some time. Here's the reality. The problem in Gaza has not been a lack of humanitarian food and supplies. Some things they could use more of, some certain medical supplies and so on. More food has been sent into Gaza than in any country in a war in the history of humanity, by far. Israel alone has put 2 million tons of food, for which they got zero credit and appreciation. And I've asked many reporters who would say, particularly not since the peace deal was signed and not in the last 4 months, but prior to that, reporters would say, don't you think Israel ought to be doing more to feed the people of Gaza? Here's my response. I would say, let me ask you, can you tell me in the history of the world, has there ever been a time when a country that was attacked with atrocities was expected to feed the people who attacked them while the war was still going on and they had people being held hostage? Can you tell me of it? And there's a long silence, because there has never, ever been an instance in which that happened. So why was it that Israel singularly was being expected to feed the people who had attacked them, murdered, massacred, mutilated 1,200 of their civilians in one day, held hostages, and then continued to taunt them? When has that ever happened? And the answer is it hasn't. And last summer, when the UK Prime Minister was particularly harsh toward Israel and talking about there's a lack of humanitarian effort, they need to do more, I simply raised the issue with Piers Morgan. I said, Piers, maybe the Prime Minister of the UK should do a little study of history. If he did, he might want to sit this one out, because I remember that it was the UK that was dropping a lot of stuff on Dresden at the end of World War II, and it wasn't pallets of food. And 30,000 civilians died in Dresden as a result of the bombs, thousands and thousands of pounds of bombs taking down that city, among others. So it might be better, rather than him being so critical of Israel, who is putting food into Gaza, to just either say, thank you, Israel, for what you're doing, or maybe you could bring a few plane loads of food yourself and walk it in and be grateful, too, for the fact that Israel is doing something that so far you haven't done.
Okay, let's have this lady here in the, yes. Ifsha, slicha. Wait, can you wait for the mic? Because I want the audience on Zoom to hear as well.
And my hearing has been shot by years and years of playing music loud and shooting shotguns in duck blinds, so I'll need all the help I can get.
As a man of deep, profound faith, which really you exemplify in everything about you, you embody faith, and you're speaking to a room of people of profound faith. What are words that you could share with us tonight so that we leave more inspired, motivated, and reassured that the place that we're experiencing in history right now is redemptive, that we should not lose our sense of security and well-being as events continue to unfold in biblical proportions? What can you share with us?
What a beautiful question, and a very timely one. Beautiful. I would put it this way. Throughout history, from the time God first decided that the Jewish people would be his unique chosen, and I say that with a sense of humility. I'm not Jewish. I don't say it because I'm saying, hey, I'm in the group. I'm not. But I recognize that this is God's choice. And I've looked through history, and the one thing one sees is that there have been many times when Israel rebelled against God. There were captivities, there were times of dispersion. But there has never been a time when God gave up and abandoned his people, because he made it clear he will never leave or forsake you. I would never bet against the Jewish people. I would never bet against Israel. And if you look for words of encouragement, I would say those come from the scripture, where the redemption is the theme that is throughout all of the Bible. It is not a book of destruction. It is a book of hope. The very word that is the center of the Jewish national anthem, Haktikva, hope. Why do you have hope? You have hope because you got a great military. You got a great military, punching way above its weight. Is it because of the economy? You have an amazing economy. How many economies in the world would go through a war and actually have growth of the GDP in the middle of a war, and your stock market grew 100%? I mean, that's pretty stunning, but that's not where your hope is. It's not in the military, and it's not in the economy. It's not in the innovations, though those are many, far too many to enumerate here tonight. I'll tell you the hope and the reason that I think every Jewish person, not just the ones living in Israel, but around the world, can look up to the heaven and look with hope and anticipation, is because God has never forgotten you. And God will never forget you, and he will never allow you to be annihilated, no matter how hard people try. And they have tried, and they are trying today. But the hope is not for any of the human reasons that we can see, which all are important and significant, but it's because his hand is mighty. And the weapons, and I would say it this way, no weapon formed against you will prosper. In my office, I have a mezuzah that was presented to me a few months ago. It is a mezuzah that is in the shape of a B-2 bomber, the likes of which President Trump sent in on Midnight Hammer. You remember that, on that Saturday night. And what's beautiful about it, it's big. It's like this big. It's really too big to put on the door. I don't think I could close the door if I put it on the door face. But I have it in a display in my office. But when people come in and say, this is one of my most treasured possessions that I've received in Israel, it was sculpted by a sculptor down near Ashdod. And he took the remains of an Iranian ballistic missile, and he sculpted the mezuzah out of what was left from the fragments of a ballistic missile that was intended to kill you and to kill me. And I remember that, and I think, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And every time I look at it, I'm reminded that what was intended to destroy me, now it is a piece of reminder of the prayer of the Shema. And what a beautiful reminder it is that the Iranians tried to use this very instrument, this very piece of metal, to kill every one of us in this room. And instead, every time I look at it, I'm reminded to quote God's word. I tell you, the reason you have reason to hope is because no matter what it looks like on any given day, God has never and never will give up on his people. And that's why I want to stand with you, not against you, every day of the week.
You may not be one of the Jewish people, Mr. Ambassador, but I think many people in this room would be delighted to have you as their rabbi. Okay, down here at the front.
First and foremost, thank you so much for being our ambassador. And I did vote for you. And you are a wonderful representative of our wonderful president, President Trump. So thank you very much. I had to write this down because I wouldn't botch it up. So bear with me. Menachem Begin once said,
Can you hold the mic close
Oh,
to your mouth?
sorry.
Sorry, thank you.
Menachem Begin once said that peace must be built in strength. So how do you balance diplomatic efforts with security needs in the current Middle East landscape?
Great question. I think the statement, and I'm not sure who originated it, it wasn't me, but I'd love to take credit for it, is that we always hope that diplomacy will prevail. And diplomacy is the art of bringing people together to bring a peaceful solution to what looks like to be an intractable problem. But when diplomacy fails, the military steps in. And the reason the military steps in is because sometimes diplomacy doesn't work because one, or maybe both sides, choose not for it to work. And then if there is going to be peace, that peace will, in fact, and Prime Minister Begin was right, it will come through strength, not through weakness. One doesn't get peace by sending a strongly worded letter to the supreme leader of Iran, because he probably will not respect that. There will be talks that will go on this week, starting tomorrow. I can hope that they will result in the Iranians and the regime deciding that they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, they're not going to enrich uranium, they're not going to build up a large inventory of ballistic missiles that are aimed not just at Israel, but the rest of the world, including the United States, as soon as they got the range for that. I would love for that to happen. And last week, when I was in Washington for the meetings with the president and the prime minister, I told the president, I said, Mr. President, I hope these talks work, because you're 6,000 miles away, but if it doesn't work and military action is the result, I'm going to be in the bullseye of it, sir. And I deeply care that I just soon, as Abraham Lincoln said when he was run out of town on a rail, he said, if it weren't for the honor of it, I'd just soon pass. I feel that way about being in the center of it. But I also then said to him, but sir, if it must be in order to bring a new level of peace and realignment to the world, and that if I need to be in the center, the bullseye of all of that, then I willingly do so, because for 47 years, I've heard these people say they're going to destroy the US. Death to America. They've said it, and they did everything they could to do it. They've killed hundreds, thousands of Americans. They have threatened this president's life and many others. 1 in 6 of the military deaths in Iraq were directly related to Iran. So if this is what it ultimately comes down to, then it's not that I welcome it, not that I want it, but I'm more than willing to believe that the long-term benefit of a world at peace, because of the strength of Israel and the United States, is a better solution than having these people one day achieve the unthinkable, and that is a nuclear weapon with a long-range delivery capacity, because I promise you, if they have it, they will send it to the United States, because they've been telling us that for 47 years. So I hope that that answers your question. Do we want diplomacy? Always. But if diplomacy doesn't work, we also want peace. People ask me, and I'm going to just say this and I'll go to the next question, but this is important for me to say. When I arrived here last year, people would say to me, what is it that you hope to accomplish as ambassador? And I think they thought I had a catalog of things, and there were certainly some things, but I said, I pray that peace will come to this region in a way that every Israeli mother is able to tuck her children into bed at night and not think for a moment the siren is going to go off, and that she's going to have to scoop up her children and have 90 seconds to get them into a safety of a shelter to keep them alive. And that every single night they can go to bed and sleep well without the threat of people trying to kill them every single day. That is my hope, and it still is tonight.
Okay, I'm going to go to this gentleman here, with the dark jacket. No, sorry, this guy. This is the problem. It's only hands up. Everyone thinks I'm pointing at them. I apologize. I will try and get to as many of you as possible, I promise. No. Oh, I actually meant him. Sorry, he had his hand up throughout. I apologize.
I'm sorry, I'm not American. I'm from Germany and from the Bible Seminary Bonn. And what you said is a commitment of faith. We totally agree. If you ever wake up in the morning and see that you have to find a new job, come to our Bible seminary, get a professor. We are very happy to invite you.
Thank you.
My critical question, looking to the administration of Trump, this we discussed all the time. We think from looking outside that Qatar is one of the biggest problems in this game or in this kind of war. And what makes me questions mark, it's not a critic to your president, question marks, to get a new Air Force One and other relations with Qatar, can he really be realistic? How dealing the process? Because if it's, I know in Germany, for example, WV, Deutsche Bank, it's all more or less in the possession of Qatar, we know it. So they're really handling the politics, they're buying whole streets, even towns now in Germany. We're totally curious. How can your president handle this problem to be very critical so that Qatar is no longer a game player? For me, it's not only Iran. I think Qatar is one of the biggest problems.
Thank you.
Well, that's a very fair question. And if I answered it with complete candor, I probably would be packing tomorrow. No, but let me do my best. Look, I don't think anyone would doubt that there are some serious issues that Qatar presents to America's well-being. Billions of dollars spent in the U.S. to influence particularly younger people through social media, through Middle Eastern studies that are sponsored on college campuses that indoctrinates a lot of young people. I believe that some of the, if not a lot of the anti-Semitism in the U.S. Is because of the propaganda that is fed and fueled by Middle Eastern dollars, not only Qatar, other countries as well. And it's very problematic. And it's something that we have to be willing to speak up about. And I can't tell you all the reasons that the U.S. has the relationship with Qatar that we have. I know that we have a significant military presence and 10,000 troops that are stationed there. It's a vital place because of where it is, how it's located. But at the same time, I hope that we will increasingly call into question those positions where there is connection to the Muslim Brotherhood, where there is the sponsorship of Al Jazeera, which is a propaganda tool of really the Muslim Brotherhood and the more radical forms of Islam. And I hope that there will be an increased awareness of how careful we need to be and how much it is important to maintain our unique partnership with Israel, because we share not just military hardware and intelligence and all those things, but we share a common value system of respect for the individual and the freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, the freedom of movement, things that really are the very heartbeat of the United States and the heartbeat of the state of Israel as well.
Okay, let's get a question from higher up. The lady with her hand very insistently up with the glasses here. Yes, we'll just wait for the microphone.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for your inspiring words, but I'm going to relate to the traffic light that Jeff just talked about. I serve as the current president of the Association of Americans and Canadians in Israel, the congressional district that you spoke about. In recent months, coming out of the Congress, from one particular representative of the Republican Party, disparaging remarks about anybody who has multiple citizenships, including United States, US citizenship, and how people will have to choose their citizenships or lose their US citizenship. And which is something that's not realistic for many of us who hold dual or even triple citizenships and so on. And the question is that going to progress through Congress? Or is that going to hopefully be tabled and not continue and jeopardize the congressional district that lives in this country?
Okay. I think that that proposal has about as much chance as my presidential campaigns did. So I think you're safe. I hear no one expressing any energy for that. I remember when it was proposed, and it kind of caught me off guard. It actually was proposed by someone who is a very strong Zionist and Israel supporter, and I'm not sure that it was targeted toward American Israeli citizens. I don't think it was. But I hear nothing from either Democrats or Republicans that there's any energy for this, that there's any likelihood that it's going to gain traction in the Congress.
Okay. Gentleman with his hand up here with a beige shirt, yes, if it's beige.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, or Mr. Governor. I'm not actually sure what is more respectful, more thought of.
You can call me Mike if you like. Just don't call me Michael, because that's what I got called by my mother when I was in a lot of trouble. So
Well,
the only thing I ask.
I've been in Israel for 8 years, but that's not quite long enough where I can call an ambassador by their first name. I still have a little more American respect than that. But thank you very much for being here. And I also want to thank the woman who asked the previous question, because the topics up until that question had been Gaza, God, Qatar. And I want to ask about the I-130 form for alien spouses to come to America. And so I hope that we've kind of lowered the bar a little bit. I really have a consular question for you. I've called many times to the embassy, and if you press 4 for the consular service, you get an automated answer telling you that you need to send an email. And I sent an email, and I got an automated response that didn't answer my question at all. And I've just been awarded a fellowship to come back to America. I'm a biotech researcher, and I'll be heading to study heart attacks, hopefully cure heart attacks. Bring some of the Israeli innovation you talked about to Texas, to Baylor College of Medicine. But I'm married to an Israeli, and we can't make the trip if I can't get in touch with the embassy, and I need your help. And so I've come to ask you for your help.
This is Israeli chutzpah.
That's the Israeli chutzpah. I'm not going to call you Mike, but I am going to take this time to ask for your help in getting an I-130 form, so that I can take my fellowship and start July 1st.
We're going to get that traffic light put up next week, I promise. We're going to get it done. No, I appreciate your letting me know, because I'm sure you're shocked to hear this, but sometimes the State Department bureaucracy lives strong even 6,000 miles from the mothership. It does. I don't know how to answer it because I'm not familiar with the phone tree that you're speaking of. I know that I don't think it's that hard to get an appointment to come to the consulate to see the consular offices. But I tell you what, if you will come down here right now, I'm going to give you a card, and then you can get in touch with me. I don't want everyone to come down and get a card.
You may regret this generosity.
He's the only one who gets this.
All right, back to the questions.
I will never do that again.
Right here at the front. Right here at the front. No, sorry, the gentleman here. Right at the front, front row. סליחה, שורה ראשונה, כן.
See, buying that front row seat really paid off tonight, didn't it, right?
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for being here. Thank you for representing the United States of America and being here in Israel, and your great support is much appreciated. My question to you is, as one of the 700,000 Americans in Israel and being a small business owner, we have an issue of being double taxed. So if I don't open a Chevra Ba'am, and I'm rather what we call an Atzmai, an independent contractor, Osek Moshe, Osek Pator, In addition to paying Israeli taxes, I also have to pay US Social Security taxes, which as a middle-class American, as we say, double taxation is very difficult and puts people in financial trouble. So does the President Trump, or you have any plans in the administration to work on that issue of double taxation for those 700,000 Americans living in Israel?
That's a good question. It won't be something that I will have any role in at all. It's a congressional question. So when members of Congress come, which is often, it's something that you certainly could ask them, and whoever your congressman is back home, something to send to them. Now, in fairness, let me say that part of the reason that you may end up having to pay Social Security tax is because you are American citizen. You do get all the benefits of American citizenship.
Okay.
Well, what I'm saying is you get to vote. You still have your American passport. If you have an issue while you're living here as an American citizen, if you call the embassy, we are obligated to help you. And so it's not that you're paying taxes for nothing. There are certain benefits that a person gets. In fact, you get to vote, I'm assuming, in Israeli elections as well as in US elections. So you get 2 bites of the apple. So maybe you have to pay for 2 tickets. I'm not saying it's ideal, and maybe there are ways it could be reformed to be more equitable. I don't know, because I don't know what the rules are. I just don't know. I'm only an American citizen living in Israel, paying ridiculous American taxes. I'm not happy about that. Thank goodness the president got the big, beautiful bill passed, because otherwise I'd be paying a lot more. And right now in this job, I'm making a heck of a lot less than I used to make when I was a private citizen. So all of that is to say, I'm not sure that there will ever be a time when it will be one or the other. There might be some reforms, but it would be a congressional question, not something that the embassy would have any role in. So.
Okay, let's go down here. Gentleman, yeah, with the kippah. Oh, sorry, this gentleman with the kippah. I realize with the kippah doesn't help very much. Yes, yes.
I thought you were going to be 0 for 2. You've tried twice now. It's going to.
Do I have to sing? Got a question for the ambassador.
That's pretty good, actually.
Who could ask it all in song? So relating to faith and diplomacy, for thousands of years, nobody made a Baal idol until the Iranians did. The Ayatollah, as my grandmother used to call him, the Ayatollah Khamenei, made a Baal idol in an act of Freudian projection. The Iranian regime is clearly motivated by a strong religious motivator. I believe that they are twisting their religion to justify all of the hate and atrocities when the Ayatollah takes it upon himself to decide who are the enemies of God and then orders a massacre of tens of thousands. We know we have a problem. And then they negotiate with America, and America sends these wonderful business people, and they're wonderful with hearts of gold, but I think they're talking different languages. And that's what's very disturbing, because the Iranians, I think they read the Americans very well, and they say, yep, well, minerals and oil will make a $500 billion deal. And in their hearts, they're thinking, we're going to dominate you, convert you, or kill you. And really, if that's the case, then they could sign every dotted line that the president gives them, but they would still remain a terrible danger for the rest of the world. So I'm asking you as a person of faith, when you speak to the president, do you have the influence, can you have the influence to help understand that it's a different language that they are speaking? Even though they may say words of negotiating and deal, it's an entirely different language.
Thank you.
One of the things I love most about the president is he has an uncanny perception of people. I'm not worried that he will compromise on something with the Iranians, because think about this, he's never wavered when he said what we demand, and that is no nuclear weapon, no enriched uranium, and got to quit killing your own people, and you cannot build up this vast supply of long-range missiles. And he said that repeatedly, over and over and over. So it's not what I think or what I would say to him. I'm just going to quote him. And I think if they believe that they can talk him into something other than that, they don't know him very well. They They weren't able to talk him into it last summer. I don't think they'll be able to talk him into it now. I do want to make the distinction, and you did in your comments to a very large degree, but I want to make emphatically this point. There was a big difference between the Iranian regime and the Iranian people. And for those of us old enough to remember 1979, I was married and had children, so I remember a lot of things then. Some things maybe I wish I could forget, but I remember them all. But one of the things we remember is that at that moment when the Shah was deposed and the Ayatollahs took over, the Persian culture was one of the most amazing, advanced, and progressive cultures on earth, whether it was in medicine, science, fashion, the arts. They were an incredible advanced society and culture. Their education level, their financial capacity, it was really the envy of that entire part of the world. So I always want to separate the Iranian people and what they've been through for 47 years under the oppression of the Ayatollahs from the regime that now is butchering them in the streets. We don't know how many, but the numbers have ranged anywhere from 6 to 60,000, and I'm of the personal view that it's probably the higher number or closer to it than it is the lower number. And they've done that because they're trying to suppress the voices of their people. But it is the moment at which they are at their weakest that I've seen since 1979. And the people are rising up, and it is a unique opportunity. Will they understand that? I don't know. I honestly do not know. But I have a great deal of trust in the president, what he says, and I have a great deal of confidence in his instincts because I've watched his instincts time and again. When everyone around him was telling him not to do something, for example, everyone around him told him not to move the embassy. They said that if you move the embassy, and by the way, that included his then Secretary of State and his then Secretary of Defense. It included every world leader. It included most of the members of Congress, even the ones who had voted to move the embassy, but then privately said, don't do it. And everyone in the world was calling him, every world leader, don't do it. It'll blow up the world. Well, he did it. And I was in the White House. My daughter was working for him at the time as press secretary, and I was up, frankly, to see her, not him, but he heard I was in the building and thought I was there to see him. So he said, come on in. And we visited, and it was just the two of us, and we had a chance to have a chat. And I said to him, Mr. President, you just announced you're going to move the embassy. It was before it had been done, but he had already announced he was going to. And I said, I know that everyone in the world told you not to. You were hard lobbied against this. Why did you do it? And I'm never going to forget what he said. He looked at me very, very simply and said, because I said I would, and it's the right thing to do. End of story. That was it. No hand wringing, no anxiety, no, well, I really thought about it. On one hand, I thought about it, but then on the other, none of that. This is clarity, absolute clarity of judgment. And I said then, that is an executive mindset that we don't see very often in a political figure. He didn't take a poll to see how it would work. He said I said I was going to do it. It's the right thing to do. Any other questions? Because that was it on that one. And I really appreciate that.
Okay. Yes, the gentleman here. If you can wait for the mic. Sorry, just to wait for the microphone, please. I know, but we need to make sure everyone hears.
Yes, I'd like to talk to you about a special group. You said the largest 700,000 Americans are here. I'd like to break that down into another fact that you may know or not know. 12,000 of the bravest of the brave, the soldiers of the IDF, the largest component, are American citizens, my son included. Now that may sound great here. They came to defend America and Israel. They left safety, and they are the best of the best. I've seen them In my own eyes, they're all my sons. I feel they're all my daughters. The question is a very real, significant problem. You can ask your friend Tucker, who wants to call them traitors, genocidal, SS, fascist, killers, worthy of the SS, worthy of the Einsatzgruppen, sons and daughters of generation of the Holocaust. But a very practical matter. In my son's unit, I don't want to mention the unit. Half of them are lone soldiers from America, France, Belgium, who are fleeing because they cannot travel. They are outed. The Hague is looking for them. And the question, a very practical question, I don't know whether the American embassy is ready for this, when the time comes, if they ever want to travel, even to the United States. Even in the United States, there have been calls, I guess, our new mayor of New York wants to basically obey the Hague over America. So I want to ask you a very practical question. To protect the best of the best, what will happen? Because I think eventually it's going to happen and be tested somewhere in this world. They're going to grab an American citizen they've identified. They know who they are. They know thousands of their names. They're preparing cases. One of my son's comrades had to flee Germany. Another had to flee South Africa, arrested. Another had to flee Belgium. When is it going to come in America? Are you prepared? And what will be done at that moment so they can be secure in what they have done for all of Am Yisrael and all of America, too? They fight for America here. They are not traitors to America, as they've been called publicly on television by politicians and your friend Tucker, who says they should be stripped of their American citizenship immediately for fighting for a foreign country. So what will be done? Are you prepared? Is America prepared for when they will be arrested somewhere in this world?
Thank you.
Very timely, because just last Wednesday, sitting at the Blair House with Marco Rubio and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Secretary of State Rubio brought up specifically, and he was the one who brought it up, that the U.S. is committed to doing everything it can to neuter both the ICC and the ICJ, the two entities that are pushing for these prosecutions, because the U.S. is very aware that if they can do this to someone who served in the IDF, they will do it to President Trump the moment he leaves office. They will do it to Secretary Rubio. They will do it to Vice President Vance. They might do it to me. There's no limit. These people have no sense of propriety or no sense of even right and wrong. It is a level of hate and a level of lawfare that is very dangerous and frankly is utterly unfounded by anything in legitimate law. So I have an extraordinary sense of confidence that I can tell you that the U.S. government is not just talking about this, it is actively pursuing a way to make it impossible for the ICC and the ICJ to carry out these nefarious actions against people for having dutifully served their country and their cause. And I would look for, and here's the kind of things they're talking. Serious sanctions being placed on anyone and the countries who participate in it. It's one thing to say we're not going to do business with Israel. But when a country decides it's not going to do business or it's not going to be allowed to do business with the United States, they put themselves in a very serious position of jeopardy economically. So it's a good question, and it's one that has the absolute utmost attention of this administration, and there are many efforts that will address it and prevent that from happening.
Okay. Okay. I can say with certainty we're not going to get to everyone's questions. I apologize, but let's have a woman at the end here. Yes. Yeah.
At the end here. It's lovely to have you with us. This is my third opportunity to be with you this season, and I think you're a delight, and we love you very much, really.
Thank you.
I would like to address something that actually hasn't been mentioned, and I want to try to focus a little bit. Let's say that Iran, and I think this is a pipe dream, but let's say that Iran accepted all of the requirements not to have America go to war with it. And they sign on those pieces of paper. What in heaven's name would make the United States believe any promise signed on by the Iranians, who have broken every promise they have ever made throughout the entire nuclear buildup? So you're in a diplomatic process, and I understand that because the world demands it. Civility demands it. But let's say it actually goes the way it's been suggested it should go. How in heaven's name would America make sure that they no longer finance their proxies, that they no longer built their nuclear weapons, and that they would no longer purchase ballistic missiles from China and build them themselves?
Well, I would say this, baked into any agreement would be the absolute ability to verify any aspect of that. It would not be on a level of a handshake and trust. Remember, President Reagan would say, trust but verify. I would say in the case of Iran, distrust but verify. Don't trust anything until it has been verified. It's not a trust and verify. It is really more of a level of scrutiny than that would be able to entail. And I know we've run out of time, but if we could take maybe one final question, and then I'd like to just say one very final quick word before we dismiss.
Certainly. Wow, okay. I apologize to everyone else except the person I'm going to choose. Okay, the gentleman here with the glasses, he's had his hand up for a while. Yes, you. Wait a second wait for the mic. Wait for the mic. Sorry, my colleague is negotiating passers-by.
First of all, Ambassador Huckabee, I'm Australian, so I'm a bit out of place in this environment. But before I hand over the mic to the person who's going to ask you the question, if you're ever free for a Friday night meal, you're invited.
If you're ever free for a Friday night meal, you're invited.
For a Shabbat dinner?
Yeah.
My wife and I go to Shabbat dinner almost, not every Friday night, but often, because we really enjoy the opportunity. And I'm going to tell you something very personal. The food is always amazing and wonderful and way too much. Way too much. It's like Thanksgiving in America on steroids. But let me tell you why we enjoy it more than anything. It makes us very jealous. It makes us very, very jealous of the Jewish people and the tradition of Shabbat. And I'll tell you why. Somewhere along the line in America, Christians quit really observing a Sabbath, quit really focusing on that day of the week in which you just didn't do a lot of activities and business and go to movies and just play ball and all the things. And I don't know exactly, I mean, I've watched it in my lifetime. When I was a little kid, everything was closed on Sunday. There was nothing to do or place to go because everything was closed. And little by little, that changed until I remember in the 80s when the big department stores started opening, first in the afternoon from 1 to 6, and then it became from noon, and then it was all day. And the whole culture changed. And so I say this with all my heart. My wife and I come away every time and we say, first of all, that a family shuts everything off and gathers as a family once a week and doesn't let anything else get in the way. I'm jealous of that. And I wish that it had never been lost in the Christian faith. And I regret that it has. And I don't know that we would ever be able to get it back, but please keep it. I know the saying is that it's not that the Jews keep the Sabbath, but the Sabbath keeps the Jews. And I think that's a beautiful statement. But I hope it's never a tradition, a process, a commitment that is lost, because more than a family meal together would be lost. It is the very fabric and fiber of what I believe holds the Jewish family together. And the most blessed moment of it is when the father blesses his children. And we've been in many homes when the children are adults, but the father still puts his hands on their head and he gives them the blessing. And I cannot begin to tell you how moving that is, and to think, what does that do within a family to build a sense of honor and fearing God and closeness in the family? So as a guy who is not Jewish, just accept that it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Please don't stop, and keep doing it, if not only for the keeping of your faith and your families as an example to the rest of us for how it ought to be. And I mean that from my heart. Thank you. I will, if I may, I know we're a couple of minutes beyond the time that we promised, and I do not want to be that guy that went so long that you said, I thought he would never quit. I'd rather be the guy, I wish we'd kept on, which none of you are saying that, so I'll go ahead and wrap this up. But I want to express my appreciation to my longtime friend, Jeff Dalby, for just being a dear friend and a great guy, for putting this together and giving me the privilege of sharing the evening with you. I ask you to do what the scripture commands us to do, and it's something I ask every audience that I can. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And when I say that, it's not a slogan. I actually mean, let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem, because it's what the psalmist invoked us to do. It's what we are commanded to do. And we do it not because it's just words. We do it because it is the greatest way that we can honor the God who chose this land and made it special. And to pray for the peace of this city would be something that would be an extraordinary gift to God himself, that we would never, ever cease to hold up what God intends for the city to be, and that is a city that is a witness to his presence, to his light, and to his peace. I want to thank you so very much. Your questions were wonderful and thoughtful, and it's just been a joy to be with you. Thank you very, very much.
I just want to say, Mr. Ambassador, your devotion to Israel and the Jewish people is extraordinary. It is beautiful. It is heartwarming. It's inspiring, and you have blessed us this evening, really, with your eloquence and your support. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We are deeply, deeply fortunate to have this man with us here in Israel. Thank you, everyone.